Hello, this is Aubrey Knight. I'm married. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Alright, so feedback is greatly important. Feel free to reach out to me through email, Substack, and all social links will be provided along with my Shopify link. And also, audio platforms that I'm on. Spreaker, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, just to name a few. Alright, so this episode is all about fan theories. I'm going to delve back into that, and I'm specifically going to focus on, and I'll do that throughout the coming weeks, and then start doing critiques about my thoughts about movies, different particular movies at large too, in general. Well, not in general, specifically that I find really interesting as another aspect of how these things reflect our culture. Alright, so here we go. The 80s. Wow, that was really fascinating time, specifically when we come into the forerunner of culture and society. And it was really interesting, particularly when we get in the aspects of the marketing teams, what have you, the movie houses, the production houses understood the impact of youth and culture. And that was really prevalent in the types of films that were being sought after and that were very popular at that time. And it was one of those things where, you can see how it transitioned to all these sort of films about youth and culture, and how it made its own into when I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s and so forth. Now back to the 80s here. And as I mentioned in a podcast some time back, there was a very interesting documentary about the Rat Pack, and particularly Andrew McCarthy. He wanted to go and he wanted to revive and understand the impact of, the Rat Pack and the unfortunate downfall of being labeled as, something that is passe or so forth. And that is it's quite interesting, the documentary. It's on Hulu. I think it's still on Hulu. But my whole point in bringing up Andrew McCarthy and other young actors at that time that were associated with him, they were very major players in the aspects in the landscape of changing movie and culture in the way that people think about the aspects of the scenario of being young. And he said he was breaking it down quite interesting enough. So he was saying that, before the 80s came along, there were movies that centered around youth young people, but it wasn't the pivotal focus, or it was nothing that was in between. It was always something really melodramatic, or just they were in the background, that whole mentality, be seen, not heard. And he said the very interesting thing about being a part of the culture of movies in the time of the 80s, there was a wide variety of different films that did its best to emulate our emulating life of the experience what it is to be young and trying to figure things out for yourself. And then I'm adding in my interpretation, my perspective about that. There was, there is a variety of movies that what they did really well is there was some that was really campy, some melodramatic, but majority, these movies didn't take themselves too serious. And I think that's why there was a whole lot of response with these sort of nostalgia, cult fans, or nostalgia, you might say now, for this generation growing up and so forth. Why it has an everlasting impact, and it will still go on to have an everlasting impact, is because these things reign true. Because, for often than not, there is something that is relatable to all these different assorted characters in these sort of films that were prevalent in the 80s. Particularly when we talk about the Brat Pack, when we talk about Breakfast Club, you talk about Pretty in Pink, you talk about movies like that, you get a sort of imagery in your mind to think, oh yeah, of course it has the assorted characters where, somebody from the wrong track or some popular crowd trying to fit in, but it's a little bit deeper layers than that. And so, moving on, and then, the 80s was a prevalent time for movie blockbusters. It just kicked the crap out of everything and said, hey, look at me. Here we are. I'm going to set the landscape for the next generation, the next generation, the next generation to come. And it's unfortunate that it's one of those things here that I want to make clear before I move on to other points. Now, it's one thing of not wanting to get in the business of reinventing the wheel, trying to bust your butt to make something new and original, but it's really far off the course to where why do that? But it's another thing to regurgitate something that's already been done, or to change a well-beloved character and push agendas that shouldn't be there. And so we got in the 80s so many different genres or categories. We got blockbuster movies, we got action flicks, we got coming of age, we got horror, we got drama, we got family. All of these things are a wide range of landscapes of what goes cohesively into the aspects of the ranges of human emotion here. And so I think that's why people look, see, think, when we get into the aspects of really driving home the cultural landscape of America, can look to the 80s for that. Because it was very prevalent into the sort of landscape of how Americans were living their lives at that time. And so it would have been very interesting if I, grew up at that time. But I'm just going from my being a avid fan of history and appreciation. And I think the 80s, that particular decade, was very cool, very neat. And so, moving on to the aspects, people were it was inventing so many different inventions. Sometimes I get flustered thinking about all the things that were ever changing in the 80s. We get in the aspects of technology and the aspects of things moving forward in a very fast pace. And so we get these different archetypes about the aspects of man versus his fate, or the aspects of culture and society, very prevalent in different shades of films. And so, also prevalent in the aspects of the 80s was society and class within the society. And so that shaped a lot of the way that directors and advertising teams were marketing and changing the landscape of the way cinema was at that time, because they understood quite well that they were living in a time where access was key, and more is more, and less is something, but more is better than less. And then sometimes when you get to the top of the ladder, getting whether it be socially, whether it be from an economic scale within your career wise, when you reach the top of the ladder, less is more too. But anyhow, my whole point in being is Gordon Gekko, his embodiment, his symbol, really said it best when the aspects of how people were thinking about this, for the most part. But now, this isn't the whole case for everybody here, but it's very prevalent to look at of the mentality and the feel and the landscape of the 80s. Greed is good. And what that meant is, and he was a prime example of that, there's nothing wrong with wanting what you want and taking any measures that you need to take to get ahead. And you could see that a lot too in the aspects of different films at that time in the 80s. Now, this is quite interesting how fan theories play a part with the aspects of culture and movies. Now, when something is very, popular, or even, and it's quite interesting, either fan theories or word of mouth about something, or that, did you see this? But yeah, I saw this, but I think maybe the reason why it played out that way is because of this. This is my theory for it. Now, why do you all think? And I like to y'all to reach out to me about your aspects of fan theories and how that changes the landscapes, or that helps, or is it supplement, or what have you, with cinema. Now, why do you think that people get so involved and there's a really deep sort of well that goes into the aspects of fan theories? Here's what I think. So, like I was mentioning, art imitating life. That's very simply put, but it says a lot with the simplicity of it, of the phrase. People are trying to make sense of plot holes, or the things that don't normally go about in everyday life, or trying to, piece together something that's quite interesting that doesn't make sense to what an experience that this person might have had with a certain situation. And I think movies from the 80s really helped to guide that sort of conversation going, and to how they were really tapping into the aspects of life as we know it, of how that can be or not be. That is the question. And it was just more genuine or authentic, that people could really relate to all these sort of characters, to where, fan theories start to come up and about. And then the mystique that was presented in the aspects of different films. And I think a really good example of this is The Poltergeist. Now, that film was unfortunate events that was very prevalent, and urban legends about it really, set the map for people to start getting more and more engaged with the aspects of fan theory. So maybe these things are true. Maybe these things did happen, and this is what this actually meant, and this is why things are the way they are in this film, and so forth. So with all this said, I'm going to read a very interesting source that I think really gets at the nitty-gritty and gets into an extra deep dive layer into very popular films from the 80s and their fan theories. Here we go. Okay, and of course the source for this will be provided for you in this episode. Alright, so it's entitled "These 80s Movies Conspiracy Theories Are Too Crazy to Ignore." Alright, so E.T. was a lost Jedi. What is this all about? It says, during one scene in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, where Chancellor Valorum is disposed, the camera pans in the bottom left of the screen. We see three aliens that look just like E.T. If E.T.'s species exists in Star Wars universe, could that mean that his powers were that of a Jedi? Maybe. Alright, going on to Daniel was a real bully in The Karate Kid, which is in that Cobra Kai show, and Cobra Kai, they played this up that Daniel was actually the one that was the bully, and they were, all the other kids were just, falling to his menace, so to speak, with the aspects of Star Wars. But in actuality, I don't know. That's weird, strange to say, because that in it itself takes away from the legacy and the character development of Daniel, and with Mr. Miyagi, and the aspects of the love interest with Elizabeth Shue and everything. When actuality, what was going on was, these were kids that were just being shown their bravado, or as you can say with machismo, puffing up their chest and saying, hey, I'm viable for this girl more than you are. And that's pretty much what it is. And of course, both sides, they went about it the wrong way. But to say that Daniel was actually a bully, that's a little bit far-fetched there. So he may have been the film's protagonist, but actually Daniel was more of a bully than his rival, Johnny. Throughout the Karate Kid, Daniel spends his time looking for fights with Johnny, and the Cobra Kai, stealing Johnny's girlfriend and becoming more violent. Now, Ferris Bueller was Cameron's imaginary friend. And so that's very interesting with the aspects of how things are dispositioned in that film. So you see that a lot of, to add on to this, a lot of people say with this fan theory that he's just a manifestation of, or Cameron is really, is vice versa. Cameron is really the one that's manifesting Ferris as an outward expression of trying to be more assertive in his own life. All right, let's see what this one says. So, according to one fan theory, one of our favorite 80s teen characters might have never existed at all. Some folks have speculated that Ferris Bueller is nothing but a figment of Cameron's imagination. See, here we go. So, that's exactly what I'm saying. So, a brass and confident version of a guy he would like to be. He used Ferris to live out his own dreams. All right, so The Shining was proof of a fake moon landing, this is a lot of stuff. I don't understand any of that, but there's been a lot of strange fan theories but conspiracies that's been about the aspects of the moon landing, that it never really existed, and that's something that the fate pretty much in general just wraps up that with that mentality that American ingenuity was never really quite up to par to be able to go out of space, for the first time. And that's a lot of hogwash, but, people have what they have. And that theories and, conspiracies and thoughts. And that's the good thing about America, have the right to express what you think. All right, this movie's conspiracy theory involves director Stanley Kubrick, and it suggests that he used subtle hints in The Shining as a way of confessing that he helped the U.S. government fake the 1969 moon landing. This includes the two twin girls, which are said to be a reference to NASA's Gemini program. All right, so Doc Brown didn't care about his own life. And yeah, this is quite interesting too. So there is a theory, I'm going to add on to this, that the way Doc Brown is, this when you first cut to him and it's a slow pan to set up the dynamic of the room, and you get, that's sort of a symbol of who this person is, who Doc Brown is, and everything is either misplaced or it's constantly going, something's burning or something's overflowing. And then you get back to his eyes and his disposition, like he's not there, he's vacant, or he's not within the realm of the sort of reality that he's in at that time and frame, which says that he is actually very depressed, or he is actually trying to continue to go through this, another theory, continue to go through this loophole so he can get his life back to where it should be, or when he was once happy, or find his happiness again. So this Back to the Future fan theory is a little dark and suggests that Doc Brown might have wanted to end it all. So it says, remembering the scene where he talks about all of his failed inventions and then puts himself right in front of a speeding DeLorean as he tests his time machines. So, was he trying to take his own life? So the stormtroopers in Star Wars faked their terrible shooting. So the Star Wars stormtroopers are known for their terrible marksmanship. But some fans believe that they could have been faking it. There are times when they seem more than capable of hitting their target, so perhaps they are under instructions from Darth Vader himself to go easy on these main characters. So it's quite interesting enough in itself, with the aspects of that he knows that particularly Luke is his son and all that, how that intertwines with itself, and his disposition about how that plays in with, does Darth Vader have redeemable qualities? So McReady gives Chills a cocktail at the end of the thing. So right at the end of the thing, McReady and Chills, now the sole survivors of a crazy alien attack, cautiously share a drink. But some fans believe that McReady gave Chills wasn't what McReady gave Chills wasn't a drink at all, but actually a bottle of a cocktail. This reason is that, let me read that again. The reason is that it was one of those things. So it had already turned into one of those things. So I don't know why I can't pronounce it right, but essentially the cocktail is and y'all know what I'm talking about, with a rag and with a burning gasoline in it, and it's mocked. I just can't pronounce it right now. But so essentially the way it's reading and the way it's saying is that with this cocktail, that he knew that he was an alien, so he was getting ready to kill him. So Who Framed Roger Rabbit's Judge Doom was actually a forgotten cartoon, The Pistol Packing Possum. There's a fan theory about Who Framed Roger Rabbit that suggests that Judge Doom might have secretly been an obscure 1940s cartoon character named the Pistol Packing Possum. There's a poster with the character in the background of one scene and has Doom's same red eyes and cartoon gun. Indiana Jones could have prevented World War II. Could Indiana Jones have prevented World War II? Some movie fans seem to think so and point to what he did with the Ark after finding the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Andy put it back in storage, but if he didn't do that, the Ark would have fallen into the Nazis' hands and possibly brought down the entire Third Reich. The Ghostbusters all perished at the end of the film. At the beginning of Ghostbusters, we learned that cross steams should be avoided at all costs because it will have universal ending and consequences. There is, like that butterfly effect. However, at the end of the film, we see the guys crossing steams multiple times and they all make it out alive, or did they? There's one fan theory that says they all perished on the spot. Allison created all of the other Breakfast Club kids in her head. So Allison was I guess you can consider her the goth type in the Breakfast Club, Ali Sheedy's character. So what is it saying? It says, this wacky Breakfast Club fan theory suggests that the events of the film never actually happened, except in the mind of Allison, aka the basket case. Think about it. She was a compulsive liar that had no friends, who admitted that she just went to detention because she had nothing else to do. That takes a whole different turn when you get into that aspect of seeing it from that point of view. Okay, so Pixar movies exist in the same universe as the Die Hard franchise. The Pixar theory suggests that all Pixar movies take place in the same universe. Molotov cocktail. There we go. I just could not get there, guys. I'm sorry about that. But, yeah, Molotov cocktail. Alright, so the Pixar theory suggests that all the Pixar movies take place in the same universe, but one superfan took things a step further when he proposed a new, even more complicated theory. He suggested linking together his thoughts in a video that all Pixar movies exist within the same universe as the Die Hard franchise. So there's a fan theory that says Top Gun's Maverick and Iceman were actually in love. Says, we all know that sometimes when you like someone, you end up treating them badly, especially if you get in the feeling that they don't like you back. Yes, it's childish, but it happens sometimes. This is what they're saying. I like the way they wrote this. It's very clever and witty, so that I'm phrasing what they're saying. But is that what was really going on between Maverick and Iceman and Top Gun? Some fans have suggested that the pair might have secretly fancied each other. Blade Runner's Deckard was a replicant with Gaff's memories. Could the reason of the strange antagonistic relationship between Deckard and Gaff was because they actually have a much deeper connection? Some fans have speculated that Deckard is a replicant and that he could have been implanted with Gaff's memories, which would explain how Gaff seems to know that Deckard is feeling. And so that's quite interesting too. And then interesting enough, I found out that maybe, and from Minty Comics, he's a YouTuber. His content is really good. You guys should check it out. Check his content out, Minty Comics. So, and I've read the book myself, which Blade Runner is based off of, is Do Sheep Dream Electric Dreams. And so the crew and the director didn't really wash over or translate. They weren't all that interested in the book. And so they took liberties with the aspects of creating Blade Runner. And so maybe that's why things lay in place the way that they are, in the film. And last but not least, Freddy Krueger can steal powers from dreams, not just lives. This fan theory suggests the attempt to explain is a suggestion to explain how Freddy Krueger came to be such a powerful villain. It goes a little something like this. Freddy doesn't just steal the children's lives and their dreams, he also absorbs their dreams. For example, the powers within their dreams. For example, if his victim could fly in his dreams, Freddy could gain that power too. Quite interesting. So I'd like to know what you all think. This reaches the end about the aspects of 80s and films and how those landscapes really, even to this day, are at the forefront of culture and an examination of life within itself, of how things moved and was sought after and thought about at that time, and how that translates to how people think about themselves and the disposition and culture and the value of culture even till today. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'll have those links for you to do so in this episode. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye for now.